Right, okay. I'm with Sean Power, Minister for Housing. We've just been to the Scrutiny panel which is discussing home buyer schemes. A lot of time is being spent on discussing it, but it's about 46 houses which have been sold off. But the island plan, the next island plan, talks about the need for 4,000 houses. It's very much a drop in the ocean. Is it a realistic scheme for 4,000 houses?
Well, between 1971 and 2001, I think the island built 7,200 houses from memory. And then I think another 2,500 to 3,000 were built between 2001 and 2008. So that figure, I presume it's the planning department have come up with that figure. I suspect if that's the island plan for the next 10 years, it seems to me a fairly ambitious figure. But you cut me cold there. I haven't really looked at that for 3 months.
It's the figure they were discussing yesterday at the home buyer, the first part of the scheme. I mean, what comes out of the home buyer scheme is that it's the cost of housing which is the problem, isn't it? Why the eternal problem which everybody's been asking for as long as I can remember, why are properties so expensive?
Well, one of the reasons behind home buy and one of the reasons behind selling housing to sitting tenants was to make it more affordable. We've been selling houses, or the housing department has been selling houses for 3 years now to sitting tenants. And in 2009 we did the home buy scheme at 260,000. I would like to have more home buy product. You heard the Chief Officer of Housing say today that we would like to have 2-bedroomed product so we could get below 260, get below 200. And it's something that I attach a lot of importance to. Why is the price of housing so expensive in Jersey? Well, there are 3 reasons. Number 1 is the cost of buying the land, is the cost of acquiring the land for housing to be built on. Number 2 is the developer profit. And the third one is the length of time it takes to get anything approved and the lead-in time on zoning. We have a draft island plan, and I have fought very hard over the last year to have an increase in the provision for social rented and affordable housing on that, and that is shortly to be concluded, I hope, and that the planning department have listened to my messages. But the overall answer is I can't comment on the overall figures you've just quoted. But we know in the housing department that we will need in the next decade between 350 and 450 new units of accommodation.
The developers, as was mentioned there, is even surprising. There's a human rights issue as regards to developers being able to get a fair price from a developer's point of view of property.
Yes.
From your perspective, what should the actual, not subsidised, the actual price of a 3-bedroom house now be?
Oh gosh. Well, we know from what we're building now at Liscay and what we're building at Salisbury Crescent, Opsicron Marche. We know what our costs per square foot are, and we know we can build a 3-bedroom house, excluding the site and excluding the legals. We know we can build a 3-bedroom house for between 120 and 150,000 in Jersey. So anything that mitigates the site cost and a developer profit on top of that would be to a great advantage. But we're not quite there yet.
But they're talking here about realistic values of £446,000 for that sort of house. I mean, that cannot be a fair price.
That puts local families outside.
But why the old housing law in the 1970 regulations had price control in it. Price of land, price of dwellings was controlled. That was got rid of, and that again was referred to today. But what was wrong with price control? Why can't that be implemented to effectively reduce the price of these new houses?
I think there has to be, I'm not quite sure whether price control will ever come back or whether it's even legitimate. I think what may have to happen is that we have to have a mechanism whereby the acquisition of land for housing, if there is to be further acquisition of land for housing, comes at a fixed price before the land is zoned. And I think that is the way it's done in other jurisdictions, particularly France and Ireland, and that's probably maybe something we could look at.
I've heard your plans. You've got some very grand plans for reforming the housing department this year. Not long before there's another election, and somebody else will come along with different ideas, or if you're still in place, you'll be implementing them. But huge plans to reorganise it, change the nature of it, change the structure of it, change the laws that appertain to it. Can all those things be done and deliver houses that the public needs? Can it realistically be done?
I think so, and I don't think I would be leading the housing department down this route unless I felt it was achievable. At the moment, the housing department is part of the states, and we have to go to Treasury for every single penny we spend and for approval for every single penny we spend. If we were to go down the association route, which is a much travelled route in the UK and in Ireland, where the housing department cuts away from the states and becomes a housing association, it then is able to determine its own future with a board, with a governing board, still wholly owned by the states of Jersey and the taxpayer, and it would be answerable to a minister. So you would have then the state's housing department becoming an association, beside it the trusts and beside it the private rental sector, and above that a new regulatory authority which would direct and attend to how social rented housing is managed on the island, and I think that's a better way of doing it. It means for the first time there would be a level playing field between the housing association and the trusts and the private rental sector. And I think
the housing association would be building houses, was it?
It would be building houses, yes.
So you could actually get into the market and you could actually control the price that you're actually providing for the customer.
Yes, we would get into the market, as we cannot do at the moment because we find it very difficult to do so. And to be able to develop on existing sites that we've got, or perhaps acquire new sites and develop the stock of more social rented housing on the island that I know we will need.
Of course, I'm always talking about the great forgotten 10,000, those without qualifications. When the planning inspectors came over, one of the recommendations in their report to the island plan is that more recognition should be given for the missing 10,000, those without housing qualifications. Is that anything that's going to feature in the plan?
It is, because the residential tenancy law, which we brought through the States 2 years ago, and that will extend out to those without qualifications and give them security of tenure. When the residential tenancy law comes back from the States, we will be able to change that by regulation to extend security of tenure on a rented unit of accommodation, on a rented flat, to those people in the unqualified sector. At the moment they have no security of tenure, but we will bring that in. That will come in when the new migration policy comes in, or after the new migration policy comes in, where we change from qualified and unqualified to the new definitions, which is registered.
It was previously hinted that you might like to get it down to equality between the work period, there was the 5-year regulation undertakings law, and the housing law, a 5-year qualifying period. Do you think that's a realistic likelihood?
I don't think it's realistic at the moment. I think if people commit to live in a jurisdiction such as Jersey or England or Malta or wherever for 10 years, then I think they have the right to be able to transact on property, and that's to rent and to buy. And I think 10 years at the moment is fair, and I don't see us going beyond that, apart from giving people security of tenure.
Just to wind up, one of the worrying aspects which is coming out of the home buyer scheme is the ministerial discretion. That there's a sort of a vagueness whether ministers have agreed to things, whether they haven't agreed to things. And home, sitting where I am, and this is a public meeting we've been attending, the need for the public to be able to sit in on lots more of this decision making. What do you think about that?
Ministerial discretion is always going to be around. I think I have to remind your viewers that Home Buy was a pilot scheme. It was a test scheme. It was a template. It's like flying a new plane. We learned some lessons from it. Some things we did very well. Some things we didn't do so well. But in Home Buy Mark II and Home Buy Mark III, we will tighten up on those areas. We will tighten up on discretion. We will tighten up on capital assets, on deposits and things like that, and deliver. I seriously want to deliver, as long as I'm in office, more affordable housing. And I really think affordable housing is where we have to go in Jersey. I think the days of a couple with a couple of kids trying to buy a house at 500, 550,000, we've got to do something about that. I keep saying that.
Thank you much indeed.
Thank you, sir.